So I've seen few other issues over the last 10 years or so get people's backs up more than this age-old war between sexes, feminist issue on the one side, and you see the alt-right and the Proud Boys and so on rising as like the reactionary force to this new incarnation of feminism and austerity after 2010, third wave feminism and so on. And really what I see in feminism, and the reason why I couldn't call myself a feminist as such, I think I prefer a term like humanist more like, is because I don't identify as a woman. That's part of the issue. I identify as both male and female. So I could only ever be like a demi-feminist or give tacit assent to feminism. But really, more crucially, I think that the movement is beginning to lack relevance now. I think it's beginning to lack relevance actually in the face of identity politics, which is, from their perspective, from this sort of feminist or the more reactionary feminist perspective, could be seen as like a self-created chimera that has sort of come out of the issue of identity politics, and also the issue of gender equality, possibly, or gender studies and thinking more about gender, and it's, but I mean, it's not really a chimera that's been created. It's one it would have been there all along, obviously, just kind of hidden in history beneath various different guises and whatnot. But yeah, it's I think yeah, the struggle of feminism now is like whatever relevance it had sort of 150 years or so ago, it's really beginning to lose that relevance. And in terms of changing social conditions and the furthering of the cause of women's rights and women's liberation, feminism has had huge victories. It has greatly advanced the causes of women's rights and so on in the West over the last 150 years, and it's those are very commendable things. Those are brilliant things indeed. But now it's kind of I think it's beginning to creak and falter a bit on issues of more relevance in the 21st century. I think for instance, it will seek to take something like the gender pay gap between men and women, and sort of make a big case for trying to end this particular issue on which men and women seem to be unequal. However, what I'd have said is a far more important issue than merely the gender pay gap is the general levels of socioeconomic inequality between just people in Western societies, or Anglo-American society, in Britain and the United States in particular. And there's some very large racial inequality gaps, and a focus on the gender pay gap sort of muddies the waters when it comes to that issue, and it sort of seeks to take centre stage when it comes to issues and different inequalities or different manifestations of inequality, which I think are more important to address, or more worthy of being addressed at a sooner point than say the gender pay gap, and this is part of my struggle with feminism. And like my other part of the struggle with it is I really wasn't expecting quite so many distinguished feminist radicals, the likes of Germaine Greer and the likes of J.K. Rowling, coming out and, really quite viciously disparagingly seeking to undermine the gender identities of transgender people. So, they're not real women. They're not real women. It's like, okay, well, can't you accept that, like, a lot of people clearly seem to believe they're born in the wrong body. I mean, very many people are willing to go to, quite extreme lengths with the hormone replacements and the surgeries and everything else to address what they see to be this this imbalance, or um, this this mistake of nature, if you like, or this 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 eventuality that they've been born into. They believe the wrong body for them, and they do go to extreme lengths to address that. So yeah, there's biological sex on the one hand, and okay, well, that clearly entails a set of biological facts. Then gender on the other, which is totally about how we feel about ourselves internally and how we think about ourselves, how we characterize ourselves. And they are separate issues. So it's on the identity politics one. Like, I suspect, because feminism has all this like female branding, doesn't it? It's like women's rights, women's issues, as a woman, this woman, 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 all the time, and I sense that quite a few of them really see a big threat to feminism or the movement for women's rights at the heart of the transgender issue, because it seems to be, to them, I suspect, threatening the notion of femininity in a general sense. And I, for one thing, don't think it does. As a bigender person, I like to think of myself as like a blending of man and woman, where I have like lovely female attributes and behaviour. And on the other hand, where I can be quite masculine if I put my mind to it. So it's a hell of a lot more subtlety and nuance. I think also a lot of people don't like feminism because it's like, well, I'm not in a female body, though perhaps I feel female. I might not be accepted by this group of people because, I look different on the outside to how they look. And, it might not be for me, it's for women. So, like, the way I approach this problem is like, okay, I'm just on the side of human beings, human dignity, justice, equality between people, fairness, and so on, just for people in general, for whatever trait or protected characteristic they have, or unprotected characteristic they have, for which they seem to be undergoing unfair discrimination. So, like, that's what I plant my flag. I consider myself a humanist, which I guess, could be something under which feminism is subsumed. But whenever I've sort of made this argument to a very committed feminist, like, well, you're a feminist then. Because you believe in equality for women. It's like, well, all right, I'm a feminist then. But I wouldn't call myself a feminist instead of a humanist. You know what I mean? I have, I guess, sort of like tacit feminism to some extent as a result of my humanism. But really, I don't endorse feminism or most of the ideologies of feminism, I don't think. I think, like, our societies have ended up being somewhat accidentally, seemingly patriarchal. But there's probably quite a robust case to be made that they are as much matriarchal as they are patriarchal. These householder women having a lot of power and influence, really, and other issues such as the only real reason men become or have a preference. The only reason we have a preference for male leadership is because we have a preference for putting men in the military. We do that because in military terms, or in socioeconomic terms, men are actually more expendable than women, because we can repopulate with a small number of men and a large number of women, but we can't repopulate as effectively with a small number of women and a large number of men. So that's why that happens. It's and like the tackle that we're born with, the innate differences between our genitalia. Like, yeah, of course it's going to give rise to phenomena like that because we can't all carry children. So it's gender roles have ended up differentiating themselves in history for that reason. But there've always been very powerful elite women. There have always been middling somewhat wealthy but not all that wealthy women. There's always been poor women. There's always been poor men, working class men, middle class men, kings, upper class men, etc. So yeah, it's a patriarchy. Yeah, okay, fine, it's a patriarchy, but it rolls over most men. It rolls over men in equal proportion to the women it rolls over. That's the problem with it. And if you think that that's the real problem, the problem of these huge inequalities between people in society, not between men and women necessarily in society, but just generally between people and classes of people, well, then you're back with more like classical Marxist thinking, aren't you? And Marxist socialism and the various iterations of how these movements on the left, aimed at redressing inequality in a general sense, have progressed throughout the years until their modern iteration or their contemporary iterations in the 21st century. So we're not looking at something that really where gender issues have so much relevance if we're taking the Gestalt view of it, or the panoramic view of it, if you like. If we're really surveying the social and economic and ideological territory involved here, women occupy only one sphere of that. They don't occupy all of it. There's big racial inequality. There's general inequality between within races, intra-racial inequalities between, say, poor whites and very wealthy white people, and so on and so forth. And these are more like the issues that we really need to address. Because lowering inequality, as we know in the data, will end up benefiting everybody, rich and poor alike. So it's very important that we address inequalities rather than, per se, addressing inequalities between men and women. And I think it causes equal amounts of frustration, feminism, on both the left and the right, for failing to make distinctions like that and failing to see where their relevance is in Western political discourse as a result of those sorts of facts. I think feminism may have a huge amount of work to do, and very important work to do in the developing world, but I think in the West now, we need more movements and more united movements aimed at, generally speaking, redressing levels of socioeconomic imbalance. But more like excluding women's issues in that process as such, and sort of addressing levels of social and economic inequality between men and women through the humanist proxy of addressing it in a general sense between all people in the society. That's more like, I think, what we want to try and achieve as people with leftist inclinations, people with inclinations towards imbalancing and harmonising levels of inequality, or redressing imbalances in socioeconomic terms. So feminism hasn't managed to assert, or it hasn't managed to reason with society effectively enough as to what its relevance is in 21st century political discourse in this part of the world. What it has increasingly seemed to do is jump on the bandwagons of issues that connect to it only via proxies or only indirectly, or that associate with women's issues, feminism, indirectly, like this issue of transgenderedness and like this issue of inequality in socioeconomic terms in society. So it irritates because it distracts from a larger picture that is very, very important to appreciate in terms of trying to address these sorts of things. And that might not be so useful now and might not be so relevant. So this is, I think, why feminism seemed to be problematic in more recent years.